surprises. How many of you had a good surprise recently that you just like to say, gosh, I'm really thankful for God sort of surprising me in a good way. This morning we're looking at how God surprises us with friends and His own friendship. His own friendship, oftentimes when we don't deserve it, or at least we don't think we deserve it. I think I've got a picture of a guy coming up here, and this is, do you know who this is? Anybody, any cultural experts here? Thank you, Charles. His full name is Charles Charlie Brown. This is from Wikipedia. He is the protagonist of the comic strip Peanuts by Charles M. Schulz. Like Schulz, Charlie Brown is the son of a barber, but whereas Schulz's work is described as the most shining example of American success story, Charlie Brown is an example of the great American unsuccess story. In that he fails in almost everything he does. Charlie Brown is a lovable loser, a child possessed of endless determination and hope, but who is ultimately dominated by his insecurities. I think we've got a film clip for those of you who have not seen this before. Okay, that's it. It's a short film clip, by the way. I should preface that. How many of you felt sometimes like you are Charlie Brown? I mean, you're the one that's going down and they pull the football away. Is it Lucy, I think, pulls the football away and you go crashing down? You know, I think it can happen to us in varied situations in life. Charles Schulz, who is, I think we got a picture of him up here, is actually, his own life experience. His first drawings in high school were rejected, It's kind of interesting. They wouldn't use it in the yearbook, and it kind of had the last laugh. But, it's kind of interesting also, you trace his life spiritually, because sometimes we trace our failures back to God. And we sort of say, if God is a God of failure, I don't want to have anything to do with that God. If God made somebody like me or somebody who creates so many things that sort of come in on me, why do I want to be moving in that direction? Charles Schulz began life, it looks like, as a Lutheran, then became a member of the Church of God, was in the Methodist Church, but later in life he said these words, I do not go to church anymore. I guess you might say I've come around to secular humanism, an obligation I believe all humans have to others and the world we live in, but somehow God was sort of pushed out of the equation. And I think a lot of us do that with failure. When you have enough failures, because usually what we're doing when we fail, we begin praying, and that's often the motivator prayer. But then when the failures just keep mounting, sometimes we say, well, what's the use of prayer? Is there a God out there anyways? It seems like I'm praying, but it's just a ceiling. How many of us have felt that way at times? That just, I'm just not getting above ground zero. And I think that this is experienced with so many people, that at some level, shape, or form, we've bumped into something which has kind of distorted our understanding of our relationship to God and who God is and what He means to us. And every now and then, I have this feeling in life that I sort of got the answer. In fact, yesterday at our men's breakfast, I said, I've got the answer. And Mike said, but do you know the question? And I said, I said, well, it's about golf. I just got the answer. I know I got the answer now to all my slices and shanks, and I've got the answer. It's all in my head, but I got the answer. But God has a funny way that when we think we've got the answer, what happens? That's exactly. We got the answer. We don't got it. It's often the way life is. There was a guy that sort of felt like he had the answer. His name was Simon, son of John. But he so had the answer. He felt that he was renamed the Rock, Peter. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" He asked, "Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." I've got the answer. And man, it's just like it found the key. I'm on to life. I know some people use this term, "I'm in my Jesus bubble. I've just found it, and life is just right now. I mean, I'm right there. Everything is just good, and I found it." And Jesus replied to him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter." Petros is the Greek word. You're Peter, Petros. And on this Petros, on this Greek word for rock, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. And you get that picture, by the way, that the gates of Hades is the idea that the church is going to break in those gates of hell so there's transformation. "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." You're going to provide leadership and direction. And isn't it remarkable that it doesn't take, but it seems like just a few moments later, that Peter, who's on top of the world, is going to be the guy underneath the world. Just a little bit later, Jesus goes on to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things, that he must be killed. And then Peter, this rock, this guy that has the answer, says, "That doesn't fit into my picture. That's not exactly what I had in mind." And he began to rebuke Jesus, said, "Never, Lord, this shall never happen to you." And Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me," what? "Get behind me, Satan," which means adversary, which means you're the one who's in opposition. "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." That's a challenge to my soul. How many of you would say, "Well, gosh, I only have the concerns of God in mind. I don't have merely human concerns"? I don't know. That's a tough one for me to deal with. I would say my concerns are so mixed at best. It's kind of like human concerns and then some of God's concerns kind of filtering in, but mostly human concerns. I mean, I kind of want things the way I want them. I'm just trying to find somebody who's kind of like me in this situation. I think most of us wrestle with this, that we are the adversary of Jesus, that we are saying, "Lord, I really don't want you to work things out kind of the way you're doing it, because it's not kind of the plan that I have in mind at all." And it's as if Peter is running down the road and he's running down the gridiron or whatever, and he's all set to kick, and the ball's taken away, and he's falling flat. We have that picture of Peter as well, when Jesus is walking on the water. And it says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. And while he dismissed the crowd, and after he dismissed them, he went on the mountainside by himself to pray. And later that night he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. And shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." And then what happens? Peter comes along, and Peter says, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come out to you on the water." And so Jesus says, "Come." And then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, began to sink, and cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" What a strange situation to be in, because I think for most of us, gosh, we'd say Peter is really unbelievable that he was willing to take those kind of steps. But Jesus is saying, but my bar is a lot higher than your bar. My expectations are higher than your understanding. I mean, you think this is good enough because in relation to everybody else, that's pretty good. But I have this desire and plan for you that's so much higher. And even at our best, it seems like we sort of fall flat. Even when we are doing better than everyone else, Jesus is saying, I still don't think that you're at a place that I'd like to see you. We're struggling, we're wrestling with this thing called this human spirit, this stuff that we're made of flesh and bone. What were you saying, Joe? I didn't quite catch that. We'll be singing at the golf course. How great thou art. Is that what you said, Joe? That's really not very nice. It's kind of my song. There's how great thou art. That's not. I don't like that, Joe. This is. This is. I don't like. No more golf announcements for you, Chuck. This is. We won't accept that because. We have this thing in us, this human spirit. One of my favorite children's stories, one that actually Wesley hates. I'll tell it because he's here in his honor. But it's about this woodcutter and his wife. They're out in the woods. I don't know any woodcutter, but they're. Do you know this story? Do you all know this story? I don't know. This woodcutter, he's out in the woods, and they're poor. He and his wife, they only have like a boiled potato to eat for dinner, and along comes this fairy elf or whatever, and says to the woodcutter, "I will grant you 3 wishes." And he tells his wife, and they're so excited. They have anything you want, 3 wishes. They're as excited as they could be. Well, they sit down for dinner, and there's their dinner, their boiled potato in each of their plate. And the woodcutter says, "Man, I'm so hungry. I wish I had a sausage to eat." And boom, there's a sausage that shows up, right? Do you know the story now? No. This sausage that shows right on up there on the plate. And the wife becomes irate. "You used up one of our wishes, and all you wished for was a stupid sausage. You absolute fool. Why did you... I don't know if you know how wives can be sometimes. They just... boom, 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 boom. And it got the woodcutter so angry that he said, "I wish that sausage was on the end of your nose." And boom, there goes. The sausage is now stuck to the end of her nose. And she's really upset. And so the woodcutter says, "I wish that sausage would go away." It's a terrible story, but it's kind of so much the human condition, isn't it? It seems like, it doesn't seem to kind of work out the way we want it to. Everything just seems like we desire, but we fall flat, and we're left maybe where we were or worse off. This is the story of Peter. That last great story we all know about Peter saying, if everyone else falls away from you, Jesus, if everyone else runs away, if all fall away, I never will. And Jesus says, "Truly, I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." But Peter declares, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the other disciples said the same. And then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest, and Peter follows at a distance, and everything is falling apart, and there's Peter, and then it says immediately the rooster crows, and Peter remembers the word Jesus has spoken, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and he wept bitterly. The position of Peter is the guy that is said he's found that answer, but he keeps on trying and falling and trying and falling and trying and falling. And you know what? There are some people, I think, at that point where they would say, I've had enough. I've had enough of this trying. How many of us have known people that have said, okay, I've had enough. I mean, enough is enough, and I've just had enough. I'm not going any further. I'm not trying anymore. And some of us may have been there or felt like that at some point in time. By the grace of God, something spoke to you. We got the story. Of course, Jesus goes to the cross, and Peter probably remains in tears, weeping about his own lack of follow-through. And Jesus then, of course, the story doesn't end. He rises from the dead, and Peter is out fishing with the other disciples, and Jesus decides to show up. And they don't recognize him immediately. They've fished all night and once again failed all night. No fish comes in. The guy says, try the other side, and they do, and all kinds of fish. And John says, I think that's the Lord. And Peter jumps into the water, runs to Jesus. Jesus is cooking breakfast, and afterwards starts talking to Peter and says, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. And again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. And the third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. I just want to say, I think in the midst of our failure, God can use us in a ways that He can't use us in the midst of our successes. I think the message of Peter is that I can use you far more from our kingdom through your failures than I can through your successes. But you've got to know this, that I love you. And you've got to love me back. You've got to know that I love you, and you've got to respond in kind. You do that, somehow everything else is going to work its way out. Isaiah 53 says, we all like sheep have gone astray, and each has turned to our own way. Each of us has failed, but the Lord has laid on Him the iniquity of us all. In the midst of our failures, in the midst of our sin, it's God's presence and His power and His transforming power that enables us to change, and He wants us to change. It's not based upon our successes. It's the guy who couldn't make it as a high school artist who is able to become the multi-million-dollar success. But the success is not so much on the basis of what people see. Our success is never really there, or at least in God's perspective, is what God sees. It's what God is doing. Is what God is able to do in our lives. And it doesn't tend to happen when we're at the top of the rung. You know, I have this picture that I was at a reunion, high school reunion one time, and an old cheerleader came up to me and said, Tom, there's a picture of you in the paper that I saved, and I'd like to give this to you. And it's an old picture about Jefferson High School playing against Stewart High School. And it's for the Northern District lead. Whoever wins is going to be in the first place team. And so the Washington Post sent a reporter out to follow the game, and they took a picture of that, and I made it into the paper. And And we were playing against Stewart, and Stewart had the state's leading scorer at the time, Jim O'Brien. Does that name ring a bell, Jim O'Brien? And does that name ring a bell? My goodness, okay. So rings a few bells, but anyways, we were playing against them, and it's the game is sort of nip and tuck, and they sort of move out to like a 6-point lead with about a couple minutes left in the game, and it says, trailing 56-50, Mike Malure hit a jumper from the side, and Jim Case sank 2 free throws to narrow the deficit to 2 with 1 minute and 2 seconds left, and then Andrews was fouled with 12 seconds left, down by 2 points. And I may have told this story before, but it's a good story. So I go to the free throw line. Okay, Chuck, you don't remember this story, do you?
I don't.
Good, okay. I go to the free throw line. Down by 2, first free throw goes up, and what happens, Chuck? Chuck, you're absolutely right. By the way, the stands are just packed. This is the game. Everything. It's cheering, and everybody's. You can't hear. It's just noise. It's just a high school basketball game. You know how this is. Second free throw. 12 seconds left for the tie, and the shot goes up, and what happens, Chuck? No, it actually hit the back of the rim or the side of the rim or something. It careens off though. And there's this mad scramble for the ball. And the ball is going all over the place, and people are going all after the ball, and guess who ends up with it? I do. I end up with the ball, and I go up for another shot, and guess what happens? No. So unfortunately, it careens off too. But Steve Greenstreet on our team grabs the rebound and puts the ball back in, bing, and the place is going wild. And the ball goes in, he gets the rebound, puts it in, the place is going wild, and everybody is, this is our gym and everything, and then the referee comes running out to the center of the court, and he's going, no basket, the time has run out. Do you know how I felt at that point in time? Not good. That's right. I did not feel good at all. But there's something about that story that seems to me to allow me to have more opportunity to minister than if the ball had gone through. Somehow, I feel like I can relate to people. Somehow, I feel like that message of the gospel is more real to me. Somehow, I feel like I can understand that God is really there for those of us who have failed. And for those of us who have failed, we can understand that God does not separate himself. In fact, he wants to be there. He wants to connect. He wants to minister. He wants to support. He wants to transform. He wants to give us his grace. And he wants to do it in the midst of our failure. He doesn't want to say, wait until you're the success story before I can send my grace and mercy and peace to you. I want you to know that it's right there. It's right in the center. It's right when you kick and you miss the football. My grace is there for you right then. I just want to say, Chuck, it's terrible that you know me so well, that you know the end of my story even before I tell my story. But Jesus knows the end of our story before we tell the story. And he's saying, you know what? I don't care whether or not you made that basket or not. But what I do care is whether or not you know how much I love you. And will you love me back in return? Because in the process, I can transform your life and I can give hope to a lot of people around you. I really love failures. I really love people who have failed. My grace and mercy is there for those people who are in most need. Lord, I just pray this morning that we can hear from you what you're saying to us. I just pray that we can have your understanding about who we are. I just pray that we can get beyond that kind of base perspective that says that our only value is when we win, that we're only as good as our last win. Oh Lord, I just pray that we can see that in the midst of our failure, that you reach out to us when we've made mistakes and when we sinned. You're there for us. And Lord, I just pray that becomes kind of the guiding principle in our lives, because it seems like it's the guiding principle in yours as well. And I just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.